Last week, I challenged everyone, myself included, to sacrifice our electronic devices in Advent. And so the first option I gave was to take this hammer, it's back, the hammer is back, and to literally destroy our electronic devices, because we all know addictions are real and devastating. And the second option I gave was to sacrifice our electronic devices based on the actual Latin word for sacrifice, which means to make holy. So it was a challenge to make holy our electronic devices. And I just gave one example, which is the Hallow app on our mobile devices. So maybe some of you tried the Hallow app this week. But as I'm sure many of you have experienced with trying out any new habit, it's very easy to lose motivation. And you try it out for a little while, and then you just give up. Today I want to share with you the number one best tip out there. It's a hack for habits about how you can actually allow good habits to stick and eliminate bad habits in your life. And I'd like to start out by just sharing an embarrassing story. Over the last 2 weeks, I have eaten a lot of cookies. Okay? I usually don't eat cookies at all, but over the last 2 weeks, I've eaten my fair share of cookies. Some point, I thought it might have been the Cookie Monster in the rectory. So there were several times over the last 2 weeks where I felt motivated. It's like, okay, I don't want to eat any more cookies. I've had enough cookies. But every time I walk into the kitchen, on the kitchen counter, there's a big bag of cookies. And so every time I see those cookies, I think about eating cookies. And so although I was motivated at times, time and time again, I would end up eating cookies. But on Thursday, all of a sudden, I no longer had the problem of eating cookies. It just disappeared. And do you know what happened? I got rid of the bag of cookies. Okay? See, most people think that building better habits, whether it's eating healthier or exercising more, is all about willpower and motivation. You just gotta really want it, and you're going to do it. But that's not true. The number one influencer of our habits is actually our environment. Our environment is the number one factor that influences our behaviors, our habits. So our environment, whatever you look around and see, behavior experts say that there's cues. There's cues in our environment. And a cue is simply something that you see that triggers a behavior. So think back for my example. I walked into the environment of my kitchen, and the cue was the bag of cookies, and it triggered the behavior of wanting to eat cookies. That's how habits are formed. So the key to a good environment is an environment that has a lot of cues that trigger good behavior and doesn't have any cues that trigger bad behavior. It's a sign of a good environment. So if I want to eat healthier, rather than rely upon motivation or willpower, the focus should be on getting rid of all the negative cues in my environment and adding as many positive cues as possible. So removing the negative cues of seeing the bag of cookies, that's really important, and adding positive cues, like maybe gluten-free cookies. That's what I really need to add. So the same is true with any habit. So there are several people here, not all of you, but there are several people here that want to improve your life of prayer. There are some people that don't, and that's okay. But for those who do want to improve your life of prayer and really get to know Jesus on a deep level of the heart, I'd like to speak to you today. When you want to build the better habit of prayer, Rather than rely upon motivation and willpower, the focus should be, how can I actually change my environment so that I have a lot of positive cues to pray more, and I remove all the negative cues that keep pulling me away from prayer? That should be the focus. So it's not about willpower or motivation anymore. It's about changing our environments to allow us to pray more. So what are the negative cues in your environment that you need to remove? Just to narrow the focus again, for your phones, the negative cues, what are those? A lot of people, it's Instagram and Facebook. You might think about praying, but then you find yourself just scrolling through Instagram and Facebook as you thought about praying. Those are negative cues you have to remove if you really want to develop a better habit of prayer. A positive cue is obviously downloading the Hallow app and putting it on your main screen. Every time you open up your phone, you see the app, and that's a cue that triggers the behavior to want to pray. But to take it a step further, something that happens at Westminster Abbey, where I went to seminary, anyone who goes there says, "Oh, it was just so easy to pray." One of the reasons why it's so easy to pray, we literally have bells going off throughout the day reminding us to go to the church to pray. What are those bells? Positive cues in our environment that remind us, oh yeah, I gotta go pray. And then people leave Westminster Abbey and say, oh, it's so much harder to pray. Well, maybe you need to put in bells in your environment to trigger the thought of prayer. The Hallow app actually has that. It has a daily routine function in which you click the prayers that you want to pray, and you set notifications on your phone, the exact time that you want them to go off. These are positive cues built right into your phone that actually teach you how to pray and when to pray. This whole task, this whole endeavor of trying to change our environments is exactly the prophecy that John the Baptist spoke about in today's gospel. John the Baptist's whole goal was to give people an opportunity to encounter Jesus. He was to prepare the way for the Lord. And what you heard as the prophecy was all of these changes in the environment to get rid of the high things that were blocking the sight of seeing the Messiah, to fill up the valleys and the things that were actually preventing people from getting to Jesus. It was all about changing the environment that you could see to encounter the Lord. Another thing was actually bringing everyone out into the wilderness. The wilderness was a place of encounter with the Lord. It literally removed all of the negative cues that people often had of getting caught up in the hustle and bustle of daily life, and they were put in an area where all that they had was John the Baptist crying out to them about preparing the way for Jesus to come. Imagine how much different your life would be if your world, like your home, your office, your computer, your iPhone, imagine how much different it would be if that whole world that you live in was crafted in such a way that it made good behavior easy and bad behavior hard. Imagine if you no longer had to rely upon motivation and willpower to have better habits, but it was just your default response because your environment was changed in such a way that everything that you wanted, all of your good behaviors, were just easy because it was just there to see. You're just filled with positive cues. And for those who really want to have that encounter with the Lord, I'm sure there's several here in this church. Imagine if your iPhone itself, if your mobile devices were actually a way that you could regularly encounter the Lord. Anywhere you are, you can just put on your headphones. If you're on a bus, if you're at work, anywhere, you can allow yourself to escape from that environment and enter into a whole new world and have someone else lead you on a time of prayer to have an encounter with the Lord. It's one of the most beautiful things about having this app is that wherever you are, you can all of a sudden enter into an opportunity to meet Jesus. And that's what this Advent is all about, preparing the way for the Lord. Is your environment something that actually leads you to an encounter with Jesus? Or is your environment something that regularly pulls you away from Jesus? So this Advent, let us take a real look at our environments and start changing them so that we can actually give ourselves an opportunity to encounter Jesus on a regular basis.